A mother's betrayal. A child sold for $200. A man with no mercy. This is the heartbreaking case of 5-year-old Shaniya Davis. A case that left a family in pieces and a community in shock. Every day we hear stories of missing children. Some are found safe, others never return home. But this case was different. Because the person responsible for Shaniya's disappearance wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a random abduction. It was someone who was supposed to protect her own mother. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that needs to be heard. Shaniya Davis was a bright and cheerful little girl. She was born on June 14, 2004, in Fayetteville, North Carolina. From the start, she was full of energy and happiness. Her favorite colors were pink and yellow, and she loved playing outside. Her laughter was the kind that made others smile. Her father, Bradley Lockhart, loved her deeply. He worked hard to give her a good life and wanted her to have everything she needed. He wasn't married to Antoinette Davis, her mother, but he always made sure to be there for his daughter. He believed in providing love and care no matter what. Shaniya's early years were peaceful. She enjoyed playing with her toys, drawing and spending time with her father. He worked in construction and was often busy, but he never forgot about her. He wanted her to grow up in a safe and loving environment. However, her mother, Antoinette Davis, had a different lifestyle. She struggled with money problems and often made bad choices. She wasn't always around for Shaniya. Over the years, Antoinette found herself in unstable relationships and dealt with substance abuse. She had trouble keeping a job and often moved from place to place. For a long time, Shaniya lived with her father because he was able to take care of her properly. Bradley knew Antoinette was having a hard time and didn't trust her to be responsible for their child. He wanted Shaniya to be in a home where she was safe, clean, and well cared for. But in 2009, Antoinette came back into their lives, saying she had changed. She told Bradley she was now stable and wanted to raise Shaniya. She claimed she had her life together and wanted a chance to be a real mother. Bradley thought carefully about this. He didn't want to take his daughter away from her mother. If things had improved, he believed every child deserved a relationship with both parents. He thought he was doing the right thing by letting Shaniya spend more time with Antoinette. Shaniya moved into her mother's small trailer home. It wasn't fancy, but Bradley hoped Antoinette was telling the truth about being ready to care for her daughter. He believed in second chances and wanted Shaniya to have a bond with her mother. At first, things seemed okay. When Shaniya visited her father, she was still her happy self. She talked about her new home and didn't seem upset. Bradley thought maybe things would work out. But over time, something changed. Shaniya became quieter. When she visited, she didn't play as much. Her bright smile was fading. She wasn't the same cheerful little girl she used to be. Parents have a way of knowing when something is wrong. Bradley felt uneasy but didn't know what was happening inside that trailer. He had no idea that the decision to let Shaniya stay with her mother would be the worst mistake of his life. When Shaniya Davis moved into her mother's home, everything seemed fine at first. The trailer was small and crowded, but Bradley Lockhart hoped his daughter would be okay. He believed Antoinette was finally ready to care for her child. Antoinette lived with her sister Brenda Davis and her boyfriend Jeroy Smith. The house was noisy and unstable. There were always people coming and going. It was not the kind of place where a little girl should live. Bradley had always wanted Shaniya to grow up in a safe home, and he worried about the people around her. but he wanted to believe Antoinette had changed. He didn't want to take Shaniya away from her mother if things were going well. At first, Shaniya didn't complain. She told her father about her new home, but she didn't seem excited. Something about the way she talked made Bradley uneasy. It was small things. She was quieter, less playful, and her smile wasn't as bright. Shaniya used to love playing and laughing, but when she came to visit her father, she wasn't herself. She didn't talk as much, and there was something in her eyes that didn't seem right. Bradley began to worry that something was wrong. He asked her if she was happy, but she didn't say much. He thought maybe she was just getting used to the new home. He hoped she would adjust. What he didn't know was that Shaniya was not safe. The house was dirty and neglected. The people living there were not responsible. Antoinette was not taking care of her daughter the way a mother should. Shaniya needed a home where she felt loved and protected, but she was living in a place where no one was watching over her properly. There were too many people, too much chaos, and no structure. At night, the trailer was noisy and unsettled. People came in and out, talking loudly and acting suspicious. It was not a home where a little girl could feel secure. Bradley had no idea what was happening inside that house. He thought he was giving Shaniya a chance to know her mother, but instead, she was in a dangerous environment. When she visited her father, she was different. She didn't run to him the way she used to. She was quieter and distant. Parents have instincts, and Bradley's told him something wasn't right, but he didn't have proof. He couldn't imagine the kind of danger his daughter was in. If he had known what was really happening, he would have taken her back immediately. But he didn't. He trusted Antoinette's words and believed Shaniya was safe. What he didn't know was that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. It was early in the morning on November 10th, 2009. The air was cold, and the streets were quiet. Inside the trailer where Shaniya Davis lived, everything seemed normal, but that was about to change. Around 5:30 a.m., there was a sound. It was faint, but Brenda Davis and Jeroy Smith heard it. They weren't sure what it was. Maybe someone was moving around. Maybe it was nothing. They ignored it and went back to sleep. A half hour later, Antoinette Davis woke up. She realized something was wrong. She looked around, but her daughter was missing. Shaniya was gone. Instead of calling 911 right away, Antoinette started knocking on doors. She asked neighbors if they had seen her child. Her actions were strange. Most parents in this situation would have been in panic. They would have screamed for help. But she acted differently, as if she was trying to cover something up. As people started asking questions, a chilling detail emerged. Antoinette's 7-year-old son, Carl, had seen something the night before. He said there was a man near their home. His name was Mario McNeill. Mario was not a stranger. People in the area knew who he was. He had a dangerous reputation. He had been in trouble before, and people knew to stay away from him. Hearing his name made everyone uneasy. The police were called, and the search for Shaniya began. Officers arrived at the trailer and looked for clues. They needed to find out what had happened. As they searched the home, they noticed things that didn't seem right. The trailer was messy and unclean. There were signs of neglect everywhere. But the most disturbing discovery was outside. On the front porch railings, there was something shocking. Feces had been smeared across the wood. It was a horrifying clue. It suggested that Shaniya had suffered before she disappeared. Detectives questioned Antoinette. but her story kept changing. First, she said she had no idea what had happened. Then she claimed someone had taken Shaniya while she was sleeping. Her answers didn't make sense. Brenda Davis was also acting suspicious. She avoided eye contact and wouldn't give clear answers. Investigators could tell something was very wrong. Then they received shocking news. A security camera at a hotel in Sanford, North Carolina had captured something disturbing. At 7:15 a.m., Mario McNeill had checked into the hotel. He wasn't alone. He was carrying a child, wrapped in a blanket. The hotel clerk Jacqueline Lee saw them. She noticed that the little girl wasn't moving much. Something about her seemed off. Detectives knew they had to move fast. The first 24 hours in a missing child case are critical. If they didn't find Shaniya soon, they might never find her alive. The police were working fast to find Shaniya Davis. Every minute that passed made it harder. They knew the first 24 hours after a child goes missing are the most important. Then, they got a big break. A hotel security camera had caught something important. At 7:15 a.m., just hours after Shaniya disappeared, Mario McNeill had checked into a hotel in Sanford, North Carolina. But he wasn't alone. He was carrying a child wrapped in a blanket. The hotel clerk, Jacqueline Lee, saw them. Something felt wrong. The girl was too still. She wasn't acting like a normal child. She didn't move, didn't talk. It was as if she was in shock or scared. But McNeill acted calm. He checked in like nothing was wrong. He used his real name, gave the hotel his real information, and walked to his room without hesitation. The security cameras recorded everything. Investigators watched the footage and knew right away the child in the video was Shaniya Davis. Now they had proof that McNeill had taken her. They needed to act quickly to bring him in. While detectives worked, they searched Antoinette Davis's phone records. They wanted to know if she had been in contact with McNeill before Shaniya disappeared. What they found was disturbing. Antoinette had spoken to McNeill multiple times before her daughter went missing. It wasn't a random crime. It was planned. The police tracked McNeill down. When they found him, they arrested him immediately. He didn't try to run or fight. He acted like he had done nothing wrong. When they asked where Shaniya was, McNeill refused to answer. He wouldn't tell them anything. The officers searched his belongings. They checked his car, his hotel room, and everything he had with him. But Shaniya wasn't there. They needed answers. Back at the police station, McNeill was questioned. Detectives showed him the footage of him carrying Shaniya into the hotel. He didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. He just sat there, saying nothing. At the same time, officers went back to question Antoinette Davis. They told her they knew she had spoken to McNeill. She started to panic. She tried to change her story again. Then, under pressure, she finally admitted it. "I gave her to Mario," she said. The room went silent. The officers asked her why. Her answer shocked them all. "I owed him money. $200. She had sold her own daughter. Not for thousands of dollars. Not for anything important. But for $200. The police had the truth. But they still didn't have Shaniya. Time was running out. The truth was out. Antoinette Davis had given her daughter to Mario McNeill for $200. She had chosen money over her own child. The police had 2 people in custody, but Shaniya was still missing. Every second mattered. The detectives knew they had to act fast. Back at the trailer home, officers looked for more evidence. The conditions were worse than they expected. The house was dirty, the air smelled stale, and there were signs of neglect everywhere. Then, outside on the front porch, they found something horrifying. Feces was smeared across the wooden railing. It was not just a mess. It was a sign that Shaniya had suffered before she disappeared. The officers knew this was not just a case of a missing child. Something much darker had happened. Detectives questioned Antoinette again. They asked her to tell them everything. At first she hesitated. She still tried to lie. Then, after more pressure, she confessed. She admitted she had handed Shaniya over to McNeill. She owed him money and used her daughter to pay the debt. Hearing this made the officers sick to their stomachs. No mother should ever do this to her child. At the police station, McNeill refused to cooperate. He wouldn't talk about Shaniya, no matter what they asked. He stayed silent. The only clue they had was the hotel footage. It showed McNeill carrying Shaniya into the hotel. But what happened after that? Detectives searched the hotel room where McNeill had stayed. They checked every inch for signs of the little girl. They found hair strands and fingerprints, but Shaniya wasn't there. Time was running out. The police needed to find her fast. Officers gathered phone records and GPS locations from McNeill's devices. They wanted to track his movements after he left the hotel. The data showed that after checking out, McNeill had driven out of town. His car was seen on highway cameras heading toward a wooded area. This was their next lead. A search team was quickly sent to the location. They brought dogs, officers, and volunteers to help. The area was large and remote, but they refused to give up. Meanwhile, the news of Shaniya's disappearance spread across the country. People were shocked. They couldn't believe what had happened. Hundreds of volunteers came forward to help. The community wanted to bring Shaniya home. Bradley Lockhart, her father, was heartbroken. He spoke to reporters, begging for help finding his daughter. Deep inside, he hoped she was still alive. The police continued their search. They knew they were close. Then, after days of looking, they made a heartbreaking discovery. A search dog stopped near a log in the woods. Something was there. The officers held their breath. Was it Shaniya? The search for Shaniya Davis had gone on for days. Officers searched dogs and volunteers worked together. Everyone hoped to find her alive. The police followed every lead. They checked places Mario McNeill had visited. They searched forests, rivers, and abandoned buildings. Then, on November 16th, 2009, everything changed. A search dog stopped in a wood area. The dog signaled the officers to something near a fallen log. The officers moved closer. They saw a small, lifeless body lying there. The search was over. It was Shaniya. The officers felt their hearts sink. She was gone. She had been raped and murdered. She had been left in the cold, near deer carcasses and trash. They had hoped to rescue her, but instead they found only tragedy. The police called Bradley Lockhart, her father. He had been praying for a miracle, but now he had to hear the worst news of his life. He broke down in tears. His little girl was never coming home. Back at the police station, officers told Antoinette Davis what had happened. She didn't cry. She didn't ask what had been done to her daughter. She just sat there silent. The officers couldn't believe it. She had sold her child, and now she was gone. Meanwhile, Mario McNeill still refused to talk. He showed no guilt, no sadness, no regret. The news spread quickly. People across the country were shocked and angry. They couldn't understand how a mother could allow this to happen. The police prepared for trial. They wanted justice for Shaniya. The autopsy confirmed the terrible truth. Shaniya had been assaulted and strangled. She had suffered. She had been taken from her home, held against her will, and hurt in the worst way. The public wanted answers. They wanted those responsible to pay. Shaniya's story became a symbol of the need to protect children. Her father, Bradley, refused to stay silent. He spoke about child trafficking and the dangers some children face inside their own homes. The police had all the evidence they needed. The trial was about to begin. Everyone wanted one thing: justice for Shaniya. The world would never forget her name. The pain of losing her would never go away. But one thing was clear. Those responsible would not walk moi. The search was over. Shaniya Davis was gone. Now the fight for justice began. The police had all the evidence they needed. They had the hotel footage, phone records, and Antoinette's confession. The trial was set, and the world was watching. The first person to face charges was Mario McNeill. He was the last person seen with Shaniya. The security camera had captured him carrying her into the hotel. Prosecutors wanted the death penalty. They believed McNeill had planned everything. He had taken Shaniya, harmed her, and left her to die. During the trial, McNeill showed no emotion. He sat in the courtroom without a single sign of regret. The jury heard everything. They listened to how Shaniya was sold by her own mother. They saw the hotel footage. They learned where her body was found. Doctors explained the autopsy report. They told the court that Shaniya had suffered. She had been abused and strangled before being left in the woods. People in the courtroom cried. The details were too painful. McNeill, however, remained cold. He never apologized, never looked guilty. He acted like he didn't care. Then came the verdict. The jury found Mario McNeill guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault. The judge spoke the final words. Mario McNeill, you are hereby sentenced to death. There was silence in the room. Then, the crowd erupted in emotion. Some people cried. Others felt relief. But it wasn't over. Next, it was Antoinette Davis's turn. She was charged with human trafficking and second-degree murder. She had handed over her own child for $200. Many people wanted her to spend life in prison. They believed she was just as guilty as McNeill. But Antoinette pleaded guilty. She avoided a trial and agreed to a deal. Her punishment, 17 years in prison. The courtroom was stunned. Only 17 years. People couldn't believe it. She had sold her daughter. She had let this happen. Bradley Lockhart, Shaniya's father, was heartbroken. He wanted justice. He believed his daughter's life was worth more than 17 years. The public was angry. They felt that Antoinette deserved more time. But the case was closed. McNeill was sent to death row. Antoinette was sent to prison. Nothing could bring Shaniya back. But at least those responsible were no longer free. Shaniya's story would never be forgotten. The world had seen the worst kind of betrayal. Now, it was time to make sure it never happened again. The trial was over. Mario McNeill was sentenced to death. Antoinette Davis was given 17 years in prison. For many, the case had ended, but for Bradley Lockhart, the pain was just beginning. Losing Shaniya was the hardest thing he had ever faced. He had hoped she would grow up, live a happy life, and chase her dreams. Instead, she was taken too soon. No punishment could bring her back. No sentence could heal his broken heart. He blamed himself. He had trusted Antoinette. He had believed she had changed. He thought he was doing the right thing by letting Shaniya stay with her mother. Now, he lived with guilt. Every day he thought about what he could have done differently. What if he had kept Shaniya with him? What if he had seen the warning signs? What if he had never let her go? These questions haunted him. He kept Shaniya's pictures around his house. Her toys, her clothes, and even her school bag were still there. It was too hard to let go. At night he couldn't sleep. He imagined her smile, her laughter, her voice calling him daddy. Now, the house was silent. He had lost his little girl. The pain didn't stop there. In 2017, tragedy struck again. Bradley's son, Chavez Lockhart, was murdered at the age of 20. He had already lost Shaniya, and now another child was gone. It was too much for one father to bear. First his daughter, now his son, both taken in terrible ways. People around him tried to help. They told him to stay strong. But how could he? His family was disappearing one by one. But despite the pain, Bradley refused to stay silent. He turned his grief into a mission. He spoke about child trafficking. He raised awareness about the dangers that many children face. He wanted to warn other parents. He told them, listen to your instincts. If something feels wrong, act fast. Protect your children. Bradley didn't want any other family to go through what he had suffered. His message was powerful. People listened. They paid attention. Shaniya's story had touched millions of hearts. People around the world felt her loss. They wished she had been saved in time. Her name became a symbol of the need to protect children. Bradley knew he would never stop missing her. But he also knew he had to keep fighting. For Shaniya, for other children, for justice. The pain would never fade. But he wouldn't let her memory disappear. She had been an innocent child. She had deserved love, safety, and happiness. And even though she was gone, her story would never be forgotten. Shaniya Davis was gone, but her story was not forgotten. People everywhere knew her name. They remembered her bright smile and kind heart. Her death had shaken the nation. Families, teachers, and leaders spoke about the importance of protecting children. Her father, Bradley Lockhart, wanted to make sure her life had meaning. He didn't want her to be just another tragedy. He started to speak out. He told parents to trust their instincts. He warned them that danger is not always from strangers. Bradley believed that if Shaniya's story could save one child, then her life would not be in vain. People listened. News stations covered her case. Schools and communities held events to raise awareness about child trafficking and abuse. Her story became a lesson for parents and caregivers. It showed them that not everyone can be trusted, even those who are supposed to love and protect. More laws were discussed to punish those who harm children. People wanted stronger protections for the most vulnerable. Her case inspired groups to help victims of child abuse. Many organizations spoke up, saying this must never happen again. Every year on her birthday, people lit candles in her memory. They shared her story so no one would forget. Bradley worked hard to keep her name alive. He spoke at events, worked with child protection groups, and encouraged stronger laws. For him, it was a way to honor his daughter. He couldn't change the past, but he could help others in the future. Even people who never met Shaniya felt connected to her. They saw her face in the news, and they felt her loss deeply. Her death made parents more alert. They paid closer attention to who was around their children. Teachers and social workers became more careful. They wanted to spot signs of neglect and abuse sooner. People started asking more questions when something seemed wrong. They realized that one phone call, one report could save a life. Shaniya's story also changed the way child trafficking was talked about. People began to understand that it happens in homes, not just on the streets. The world now knew that a child can be in danger even with family. Shaniya had been a loving, happy little girl. She had her whole future ahead of her. She should have grown up, gone to school, made friends, and had dreams. Instead, she became a symbol of why children must be protected. Her father carried the pain of losing her every day, but he also carried her memory. He wanted her life to mean something more than tragedy. And because of her story, many people opened their eyes. They promised to do better. They promised to protect the next child before it was too late. Shaniya's legacy would live forever. Shaniya Davis is no longer here, but her story will never be forgotten. She was a child who deserved love and safety. She should have had a long, happy life. Instead, she became a victim of betrayal and cruelty. Her case opened the eyes of many. It showed the world that danger is sometimes inside the home. It proved that evil can come from those who should protect us the most. People could not believe that her own mother had sold her. The thought of it was too painful to accept. A mother's job is to love, not to harm. The world was shocked and heartbroken, but it was also angry. People wanted to make sure this never happened again. Laws were strengthened. More attention was given to children at risk. People became more aware of child trafficking and abuse. Schools and social workers paid closer attention. They learned how to spot signs of neglect and danger. Shaniya's father, Bradley Lockhart, made a promise. He would fight for other children. He would never let his daughter's story fade away. He traveled to speak at events and organizations. He told parents to listen to their instincts. He urged people to report anything suspicious. A single call could save a life. Many listened. They became more protective. They asked more questions. They paid attention to warning signs. Shaniya's story became a lesson for the world. It taught people to be more careful, more aware, and more involved. Her life may have been short, but her impact was huge. Every year, people still remember her. They light candles, say prayers, and tell her story. They use her name to push for change. Shaniya should have been here today. She should have been growing up, playing, and laughing. But even though she is gone, she is still making a difference. Because of her, people have opened their eyes. Because of her, many children have been rescued in time. Because of her, the world is paying attention. Bradley will always miss his daughter. He will always wonder what her life could have been. But he also knows that she did not die in vain. She became a symbol of why children must be protected. Her name is a reminder to never ignore the signs. Her face is a reason to stand up and fight for the innocent. She was more than a victim. She was a child who deserved better. And because of her story, the world is working harder to protect the next child before it is too late. Rest in peace, Shaniya Davis. You are gone, but you will never be forgotten. Shaniya Davis deserved a life full of love, safety, and happiness. Though she is gone, her story must never be forgotten. Let her memory be a reminder to protect the innocent, speak up when something feels wrong, and fight for justice. If this story moved you, please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Your voice matters. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an Important story. Thank you for watching, and let's continue to stand up for those who can't speak for themselves.